Hi, I'm Christina and your host Samuel, and welcome to Over the Edge podcast sponsored by the Edge Ministry. Tonight's calling is to take a look at how God plays a role in the life of a paramedic professional.
Yeah, paramedics are skilled medical professionals that serve our community 24 hours a day throughout the year. Tonight, we're excited to have an EMS support professional with us, Pepito Biclair. Welcome, Pepito.
Hi, Sam. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
I've admired EMS professionals for many years for what they do and have always wondered what draws someone to help others as a career.
Well, to answer that question, I have to look back and, I guess, understand why people are drawn to EMS. And I found out throughout the years that there's a lot of commonality among the personality, among the co-workers and the people who actually train to be in that profession. And I think the biggest role is these are people that wanted to help people who are in distress and people who feels like there's nowhere else to go, nothing more they can do that can help themselves. So people need people to help them through a certain crisis or any form of emergency. And I think that's what draws people into the profession more than the other characteristic, like other people like flashing lights, loud sirens, and driving the ambulance. But I think the overarching character is a character that there are always people that are willing to help others.
Right. And going personally into your background, what personally motivated you and your background? I know you're from the Philippines, yes?
Yes, I am.
So talk about your transition into Canada and yeah.
Yeah. So as far as my background is concerned, looking back, I think I was already born into a family or an orientation of that caters to that thing that you want to serve people and help people. So I was born in the Philippines and from a small town in one of the islands in the Philippines, and I was my dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse, and my mom's sisters, they were all nurses. So we're already I'm already brought into the world of medical profession, already surrounded by medical professionals. So it didn't take long for me to I guess made my choices in such a way that it kind of like orient to that direction. So, and then from there I went to medical school too, and I became a doctor in the Philippines. And then I was planning to have a good career in the Philippines, but then I think God has other purpose for me, and that kind of like veered off and went from that plan to a plan that needs to happen in Toronto. So, but again, the idea, I mean, that feeling of wanting to help people is still in my heart. It's always in the back of my mind, and whatever I do here, it always points to I should always go and reach out and help others. I guess that's kind of like the short version of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So actually, I'm gonna hit you with some might call it a difficult question.
Yeah.
If God exists, why is there so much suffering in the world?
Well, there is it's not the first time that I encountered that question, but there was a point in my life where I asked the same thing. in the paramedic world, you see a lot of suffering and pain, and in emergency crisis for a person or a family. But you always think about, why does God let these things happen? They seem to be a very very negative thing to happen to a person or a family. But I think for me personally, they happen because God has a purpose for it to happen. It doesn't happen by choice. In as much as, the way I look at it, that why does Jesus Christ have to die on the cross to save the world? He could have just said, okay, I'm gonna raise myself up to heaven and I'm gonna save the world. I have all the powers to do that. But the crucifixion and the suffering has to happen so that the world can be saved. So on the same note, there are crises, there are events, and there are suffering, there are pain that needs to happen so that other people will benefit from it. Maybe some people will be saved because of other people's suffering. But for me, the question is not why God allow pain or suffering to happen. It's more like, what am I gonna do about it? Death, suffering, and pain and tragedy happens every day. I think the question is, what are we doing about it? What are we doing as a Christian to help, or to learn, or to maybe come to Christ? So it goes back to your personal decision, I guess.
Have you ever come to the point where you question God? You were angry with God? Like, I imagine in your line of work you have seen probably things that...
Yeah. I did, and I think it's a very human reaction to a tragedy, or because when we were in the Philippines, I was newly married, and we had our first our baby, and then we had an emergency, and we lost our first baby. So at about 33 weeks. So now I can share and talk about it, because I think God allowed that. God allowed that event to happen so that some people at some point, sometime in the future, will benefit from it. Who knows? Maybe this podcast will reach out. That experience will reach out through this podcast more people, so they can understand how God works. Not that we can really understand how God works, but we can appreciate how God works in our lives. But so we had that crisis, and then of course, when you lose a loved one, the first question is why. Why does it have to happen to me? Why does it? Why me? Why that situation? Why that moment? But then, and I did look and seek for answer, and a lot of the answers that I get from the Bible are words of comfort. But there was one passage that stuck to me, and it was a passage that says, "Why ask?" I think at that point God was talking about Job and how he went through his agony, and the bad things that happened to him. But so he started asking, why me? And then God says, why do you ask? If you trust me, then you shouldn't ask why you. I have a plan for you, and I'm gonna make it happen through your life, through your experience. And that really kind of like grounded me into, I would say, if it's a wrestling match, ground me into submission. I'd say, I'm asking the wrong questions here.
Mm-hmm.
So that answered me, and that stopped my quest for the answer for why me, why her, why now, which is very, I guess, a very human tendency. So because of that, also, I think that experience veered me towards becoming a paramedic in Toronto, because I have no plans of coming over to Canada, but for some reason God worked through my life, my wife's life, that I ended up here. It's not that I didn't make a choice, but I made a choice, but it wasn't in my sort of 10-year plan after graduating from medicine. So, but here we are, and being a new immigrant in the country, I was looking for areas where I can serve. I'm always looking to serve other people, and paramedicine seems to be the field that opened up for me. And because of my personal loss, it made me understand more why people are suffering, or why things are happening, like sort of bad things according to our definition are happening to people, and gives me that passion again to go and serve and help. Because I think for me, there shouldn't be anybody who will, if I were to direct everything and plan everything out, there shouldn't be anybody who has to go through what I went through in my personal life. So I guess that's what drove me into paramedics.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess just hearing that, I would assume it takes incredible amount of perspective to see it from that view. Like how it must have taken you time like some time to view that as in to come into your own terms as to this is maybe something that God had planned.
That is correct. That is true, and it's an ongoing process still. I'm still looking back, even up to now. I'm still looking back and looking forward at the same time, and see if this was really where God wants me to be. I've been a paramedic for about 12 years on the road, in Toronto, and then I hurt, and then I got hurt. I got injured. So now I'm working as a modified paramedic, but I'm not dealing with patients anymore. And that's caused a lot of setback for me. Yeah, I love talking to patients and now helping people out, but because of my injury, I couldn't do that anymore. So for me, maybe it is another way. It is another way of God telling me, I want you here. I want you to go this way. Your injury or whatever happened to your life is because I'm trying to navigate you to where I want you to be, so I can fulfill my plans in this world. So the perspective, having that perspective now, is because of looking back and looking forward, and
right,
looking out for God's sign and opportunity, which is, it's just kind of hard to do.
Right.
He doesn't come to us and say, "Hey, go left or go right." It's you have to be, and sometimes a very subtle, still small voice is the way that they describe it to be. Yeah.
Well, what is your day like? Like as a paramedic, before you were injured, what was your days like?
It was busy. I mean, you work it's a 12-hour shift, and it's a rotating shift. So rotate from days to nights or afternoon shifts, 12 hours, but you're not guaranteed to go home on the 12th hour. There's always going to be a call at your 11th hour, and you have to go and do the call. So a 12 hour sometimes turns into 14, 16 hours, and it's tough, but that's the nature. I think that's the nature of the job, right? So it's and you have 4 days or 4 nights straight in a row, and then by the 5th day you're supposed to be off, but you're pretty much so tired, and that day's pretty much a write-off. Like there's not much you can do.
Right.
So that's how the day or the night starts usually. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of driving.
Yeah.
And, you get the excitement from driving around on lights and siren.
Right. Right.
So
if I ask you, just out of the blue, for these past 12 years that you have been serving, what is one story or one patient that jumps out at you?
I'm not sure if I have I'm at the liberty to of course I can talk vaguely about my experiences, but I don't think I can give specifics just to I guess comply with patient confidentiality. But for me the biggest call that I will never forget would be a call about a little kid. I never really thought that. I've done a lot of calls like pediatric calls, but I'd never thought that particular call would hit me close to home, because I have 2 kids that are almost of similar age. So that really struck close to home, and I will never forget that call. Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I don't discuss the details, but
it's okay.
But I think it just points to the fact that our personal life as a paramedic and our professional life are sometimes not far apart. The hardest call for one paramedic might be the easiest call for the other one, because I think we all look back and relate to it based on our family orientation and family background. Yeah.
In your line of work, how do you find expression in your faith? Like, how can you express your faith in your day-to-day work?
It's very hard. It's very hard because I think there's a certain liberty for you to express your Christianity or your religion in a workplace, but then you cannot recruit other people to believe in what you believe in, because other religion can use the same thing, and it becomes a chaos basically in the workplace. So we adhere to a certain professional standard that when it comes to personal beliefs and religious beliefs, it's personal. Like you can't sometimes you can't share it to your partners or your co-worker for the day. But for me, the biggest expression would be action, I guess. It's through my action. It's through the way I conduct myself in an emergency situation, and as well as the way I conduct myself with other healthcare professionals in the hospital. Is hopefully my voice to say, if I was a Christian paramedic, this is how it's gonna be. So aside from that, there's not a lot of avenues to express vocally about Christ, about God, unless I guess the patient wants to talk to you about God, then you can engage that conversation. Otherwise, it's you have to be like there's a professional standards, I would say, that you have to adhere to.
How do you balance that time of work and your personal life and your family?
Very, very hard. It's a very hard schedule to balance a family work family balance, because you can be called at any time, and your shift can be extended at any time, and there's no way to say that you're gonna go home on time today, and tomorrow you won't. So for me, balancing is more of a quality, I guess, like engaging the kids more, engaging with the family more with the little time you have, and try to make that as your first priority on your days off. Get back into their world, and they get back into the family gets back into your world, and then reconnect. And you might not have it all week, but you have 1 day or 2 day of quality time, and that's, I think for me, that's how I got through that the shift and the work schedule and the family.
Right. Yeah. I mean, could you just, this might be a little bit off top, but I know you have two great boys, right? I know Jacob from church, right? I know every time he's up, at least I think I've seen him twice on stage. Every time he performs very well. Like when he reads scriptures, he reads it he's so presentable. And every time I see him, I also see you. You have this look like this. You have such a proud, like you're so proud of him. Could you just speak about your two kids, like how proud of you are you of them?
Yeah, sure. Jacob has come a long way. He's coming along by himself, and I'm really proud of how he conducts himself, and how sometimes he makes his own, like he expresses his own opinion, but and I'm glad that he's doing that out of his own will, because I think that's important for when he grows up, and I'm no longer here to coach him, then he knows what to do. But yes, Jacob, like I said, I came to Canada, and then we were planning to have a family, and now we're blessed with, since we lost our daughter, now we're blessed with two boys. They have special needs. They both have autism. So our world kind of like, are a little bit different than a normal family, like you would say a normal regular functioning family. But so because of that, our joy and our their satisfaction are different. The levels of joy are different. Having seen Jacob stand in front of the church and read the scripture is the whole world to me. Right. When Jacob was 2 years old, he was diagnosed with autism, and he never talked. He had very, very limited language, and from that to being able to read and comprehend and read the scriptures is amazing. I don't know how to explain that, but for me, I leave that to God, I guess. He has an older brother who also has autism, and he's more severe than Jacob, but he also has come a long way. Very, very limited. Unfortunately, he's a very, very limited language. So the way he sees the world is totally different. So from the emergency world of being a paramedic to home with two kids with special needs, that seems to balance out from a very, very fast moving, I guess, day to a very, very slow moving day. But they are. I'm glad that Jacob is thriving at church.
Right.
and I want them to realize, like, even if I had to leave something behind for them, I want them to know that there is a God. First of all, I want them to understand that, there is a Christ. If they don't understand anything about the world, if they can only understand that there is a God and they have to fear God, then my job is done.
Right.
So
I think there was one time where Jacob was the Hulk, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't he? He was the Hulk. He was the star of that whole production. I think everybody loved it because he performed so well as that superhero. Like everybody was themed as a character, and it was really good. Everybody had a fun time.
he did, yeah. I think he had fun too, but I'm not sure if he understood what he did there, but he kind of like did it because that was his role, and he did it the best he can, and he doesn't. I don't know if he understood what the effect of that was to other people, but I keep encouraging him, and I keep telling him, like, Jacob, the kids really had fun, like, working with you, and kind of like encourage him to be more social, I guess, because it seems to be a challenge with kids with autism.
When you have a decision to make, how do you decide what is the right course?
Would that be regarding patient care, or the paramedic, the profession of paramedicine is basically in line with the practice of medicine. So we are bounded by ethical guidelines based on ethical guidelines that a doctor would have. So we base our decision on that. Basically, the idea, I guess the word para means along or beside. So if you are paramedics, you're practicing alongside medicine. So you're the easiest way to say it, so you're a doctor's assistant. So he delegates some practice to you to act on his behalf. So those come with a lot of ethical standards as well. So that's how it's I guess it's determined. So
right. What a paramedic does is very similar to what an emergency doctor does. They go to the place called Emergistan. I read this somewhere, which is an emergency room, and people along your work have a very unique language that only paramedics can understand.
Yeah, we have a very poor taste of I guess of jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That goes along with how comedians deal with, how do you say this? The way of dealing with stress is they make a joke out of it, right?
For me, that's my only personal assessment.
Right.
Other medics may not see it that way, but I think that's the reason why they're doing it, because it as a human being, you see it's like, oh, this is abnormal. How do I process that so it becomes normal to me? So, make fun. Yeah.
When are you allowed to cry?
Never. No. I think you're allowed to cry anytime, but not a lot of. It's still being looked at as like a weak character to cry in public. That's why there's a lot of pressure that gets internalized and builds up. But for me personally, I've cried 3 times in my adult life, and that's after 22 years old. I consider myself an adult at 22, but no. First time I cried was when my daughter passed away, and I cried not for her, but I cried for my mom, because she was expecting a granddaughter and she was very excited, and when it didn't happen, then it made me feel like I failed her. So I cried at that time. And the second time was when I was having a normal day. I was doing I was reading, I was having a devotional, but then there was something that touched my heart during that time while I was reading the Bible, and I cried for my two boys because it felt like I was so sad that they're gonna grow up in a world that they will never learn how to navigate. I became so anxious, and I cried to God, like, how do you? And I asked him, like, how do you fix this? Or like, what else can I do to help these kids, be on their own when I'm not here? So that was the second time I cried, and the third time I cried was when Pastor Craig's wife passed away, and I cried for him. And that's just because I feel sad for him. I feel like, if I was in his shoes, what would I do? We had, we grew up together, we almost had a retirement in sight, and then all of a sudden God has a different purpose. Yet, and then how is he, I was like, what's life gonna be for Pastor Craig and Braylin now? Because Deb's gone, right? So I cried that time, and I think I told him to, I cried for you. And I guess that's the saddest part of my life. Sam, you're gonna make me cry. See, laughter again.
Right.
Yeah.
It becomes an automatic mechanism.
Yes. It's I think if you go through a lot of difficulties in life, it becomes natural, I guess. I had to pull myself back and bring myself back to get my composure so I don't cry. So next thing to do is to laugh about it, laugh about the situation, and I think that's a very human tendency.
Where are you allowed to be vulnerable if not in the workplace? How do you show your vulnerability? That's
a good question. There's not a lot of places that you can, and I don't think a lot of people also will understand that you're vulnerable. You get. There's not a lot of people that can comprehend that you're allowed to be vulnerable. That's I think that's one of the root cause of having so much stress inside, and tendencies. There's some tendencies to go and develop a bad defense mechanism, and I guess sometimes the outcome is PTSD. Sometimes the outcome is anxiety, depression, things like that. So, but it's always nice to have somebody to talk to, but it's a very specified, or the field of practice is so specialized, I would say, that you can only talk to a few people that can understand what you're talking about. So that's when Christ comes in handy. God comes in handy when in your deepest, darkest times you need to vent out, you need to talk to. So
what has kept you going this long?
I guess the love for God. Like, for me, I already knew I was called to serve. So I think as long as God keeps me here and gives me a mission to serve, and I know I have to keep going. I guess it ends when he has nothing else for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I always, I don't know, I have a tendency not to look at what's in front of me. I always look back to God, doesn't matter what work, what scenarios, what the environment is. I always remind myself on, what does God want me to do in this scenario? Where can I help in this scenario? I guess that's also God's way of saying, how can I present God into to this scenario? So hopefully that's what I'm doing, but that's what I believe I'm doing. If God sees, if other people sees God through my action, then I've done my job, kind of thing. So
I guess I just want to ask one more question. Is that default mechanism where laughter becomes the way to cope with it? If you were reaching out to another paramedic, when would you know when to help?
It's hard. It's very hard because it's hard unless it's the information is voluntarily given. Otherwise, the signs are very subtle. And somebody gets hurt or somebody does something, then it affects everybody, right? But it's hard to reach out if they're not reaching out to you. So I try to listen, be sensitive to what they're talking about, but as a paramedic, and a lot of our paramedics, we have a different mechanism to shield ourselves, so that we don't become vulnerable. But I've experienced a lot of like trauma, like traumatic effects of PTSD and suicide in the profession. So it's there. It's not a hearsay anymore, and happened too many times now.
In your line of work, do you have like a brotherhood? Like, is there a bunch of people who you routinely call co-workers?
Yeah, I think it comes with the profession. Same as if you're a firefighter or you're a police officer, you belong to a brotherhood of firefighters. You belong to a brotherhood of police officers. It's the same thing with paramedics. If you become a paramedic, then you belong to a brotherhood or a family of paramedics, and it's a different world compared to. I know we work for doctors, but it's a different world compared to a family of doctors. So because our environments are different, so we do have a certain language that we use, and the jokes that we use, and we have codes, kind of, and that's all. I personally, I would say that's only to cope with what's going on. Like in our world, it's always an emergency, it's always a crisis, and it seems like laughter or jokes are a medicine into that, right, to ease ourselves into, hey, what just happened there,
right?
Or what was that call about? So I think as a human being, sometimes if you see a lot of tragic things or tragic things happen to you, your best coping is laughter. So you make fun of yourself or the
right.
situation, but there is a certain language that goes with a group.
I've heard you were talking about serving as a paramedic, and like this is what your calling was. When you go home, does this does the responsibility of being a paramedic and the tragedies you see, does it ever weigh on you?
It does. I'm not, and that's it's a very hard issue right now that a lot of paramedics are dealing with, because and until you recognize that it does, we're always thinking that we're the tough guy, like, nothing can affect us. But after 10 years, 15, 20 years, it actually does take a toll on you. And because we're not allowed to discuss a lot of our calls, a lot of our work to our family, by ethics, by virtue of ethics, or by virtue of just, you want to protect them. You don't want to discuss this over dinner table. Then you internalize it a lot, and it doesn't have an outlet. And then a few years of that, then it builds up, and some people are not. Some medics are not taking it well. Some people are. Some medics. It has some negative effects to some of the paramedics that I see on the road. Yeah.
How do you deal with that internally? I can only imagine what
It's tough. I'm happy that I had Christ. I had a Christ that I can talk to. That's my best defense.
Right.
Internal conversation. I guess as a Christian, my view of that situation is different. I have questions. I have issues. I have complaints. I have a God to go to, and complain to.
Right.
And I know He's listening, and so it doesn't build up. But sometimes those experiences doesn't need to be expressed to other people. You see, so.
I just had a conversation with my mom this morning, and she was talking about the coronavirus, which headlines are spreading left, right, up, and center. When people cough, it's cover your face. And when I talked to my mom, who's in Hong Kong, and she was telling me, she was like, Sam, go get a mask. I'm gonna go order it on Amazon for you. And she told me something which was very interesting. She said she's seen the selfishness in people. She would go to a grocery store, and she had a friend who went to a grocery store, and that person saw somebody taking six rolls of toilet paper. They would go in, it was completely empty. And in these times of crisis, everybody starts to panic. How as a paramedic do you ever stay so calm?
That I think it goes back into our human nature. If we're faced with a tragedy or a crisis, we tend to try to save ourselves. I guess I don't know if I'm correct, but I think that's what your mom was referring to as becoming selfish, and that's a human. For me, it's a human reaction to save yourself first, save your family first before you save others. In fact, I think I just heard the news today that they're advising people not to purchase N95 mask if you don't really need to, so that other people in areas with more more patients can avail of that N95 mask. Because I think as of now our risk of having coronavirus here in Toronto is not as high as Hong Kong probably, or China even, but the manufacturer of N95 masks just can produce only so much.
Right.
So if we hoard all the N95 masks here in North America, then people in China is not going to be able to. But then, it goes back into the tendency of people's tendency to save themselves first.
Right.
I think as a paramedic, we would do the same thing, if we do by reflex. See, but there's something about the profession that makes you think twice, though. That maybe somebody else can benefit from this rather than me. We already have it in our practice to wash our hands, as often as we can. Bring your hand sanitizer, put it in your pocket so you don't know, 10 minutes from now where you're gonna be, but at least you get that. That's a very good protection. Like I said, we go back to the incident of SARS, Sam. I don't know if you remember, but because of that, we are more aware and we are more prepared now. So you would think, did God really allow that SARS to happen just to hurt people, or did He allow SARS to happen so people now can be more ready for something like a coronavirus? So for me, it makes me think. It makes me think on how God, and you look at the situation, and then I see more of how God works through our different lives, through our lives, and I still claim to His promise that in the end all things will work together for good for all that love Him, right? So I don't think He is a God who wants to inflict pain on people. But I think He is a God who wants to save people. But sometimes saving people has a cost to it. So that's my personal opinion. But yeah, so coronavirus is the only thing that amazes me, or gets my attention, is how fast and how rapid this virus is spreading. We have flu here, and a lot of people died from flu every year, and we don't notice that. But this one takes the attention of the whole world, because not only is it spreading fast, but it's hard to control. Unlike SARS, we didn't know that it was already here before we realized it was already in our community. But this one, I think we have a heads up, but then we can see the number of cases, number of infection every day. It spreads exponentially. I think that's how they gauge on whether they should declare an epidemic or not as well. So that seems to be, and also the idea that this used to be a virus that only infects animals, and now it's starting to infect human beings. It's something to do with, I don't know, maybe the environment. Yeah, maybe the environment is changing, and but I guess the best we can do here is just be cautious. Be cautious. Wash your hands all the time. We don't have to alienate people, I think. If we're cautious enough, we wash our hands, we do our due diligence, and the risk is low, I think we'll be okay here. That's as far as my opinion goes.
Right.
But
so if you were to talk to someone who is considering getting into this profession, as a Christian, how should they prepare themselves spiritually?
Well, they have to have, I guess, I don't know if you can prepare for it. Sometimes you have to be, for me, it was because I was born into the family of people who are serving other people. So that came easy. But I guess the idea is you have to have a heart to serve other people. Sometimes even serve other people at your expense. So if you don't mind that, then I think that's a good fit for you. The rest are technical, but the biggest part is, even at your inconvenience, would you be okay to lend out a helping hand? I think for me that was the biggest gauge, and I learned that from my dad when he was a town doctor, and then I remember at 3 a.m. somebody will come and wake him up because they need stitches, or they need an intravenous, and his living room is always a hospital. It's always ready to serve people. So we didn't have a lot of furniture. We have a big space in our living room that's connected to the dining room, and then that came handy with patients coming in 3:00 in the morning, or in the middle of the night. So I grew up watching that. So it was easy for me to say, you know what, somebody calls me at 3 a.m, I don't mind. I'm gonna go and help. So for me, that what got me ready for the profession, medicine and paramedics, I think, for both. Yeah.
Well, what would you say are some unique temptations that is there in this line of work? What do you like? What would a temptation a paramedic would face?
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot, because you're exposed to medicines. You're exposed to drugs. You're exposed to a lot of stress. Sometimes our coping mechanisms are not the best choice. Some people turn to drugs. Some people turn to alcohol, and that's always a risk, I think. So that's a temptation. You're also exposed to a lot of narcotics. So I think, in as much as doctors are exposed to these things and they have access to it, it is always a potential for. It's always a temptation to do something illegal or something bad. Yeah.
How do you, in your line of work, how do you deal with failure, disappointments, or setbacks? How do you deal with it?
Very hard. Very hard to say, because each service have their own way of debriefing. You see a lot of people lives kind of like hang in the balance, and it's up to you to call the shots. And sometimes it's a good outcome, sometimes it's not a good outcome, and that says something to a paramedic, as that could be taken as a failure or taken as a disappointment. And there's a lot of setback that comes out of that. So we deal right now. We don't really have a fixed support to address that. Each service have their own, I think, support system to address that part of the profession. I've seen a few PTSD colleagues that develop PTSD because of years of practicing the profession, but there's not a lot of support that's gearing towards that. So I would say it's still an evolving plan, or it's an evolving program. Depends on what service you work for, whether they can address that kind of service or not. So, but most of the time, we deal failures and setbacks on our own. That's why there's a lot of tragic effects to the paramedics. I think I speak on behalf of a lot of first responders, because I think we go through the same scene. Police officers are there too, so I think it affects a lot of our workers to a point where it's being recognized now, even as a bills. We've been passed to recognize things like anxiety, like PTSD and stuff like that, and they're each service is trying to address that. Yeah.
To any of your fellow colleagues or listeners that might be paramedics, what is something you would say to them in show of support? How would you reach out to somebody who's suffering from this type of anxiety or PTSD?
Get some help. I think that's the first thing. The first thing that you have to recognize is you cannot do this on your own. If you come to a point where it's affecting your life and your function, it's okay. I would say it's okay to ask for help. As a paramedic, sometimes you have an impression or an idea that we're the ones who provide help, so we don't need help. So we can't ask for help from other people because we're the one who provides help. But I think we should just get off that mindset and then just accept the fact that everybody needs help. So, and I'm sure there's always access to help if you start talking about it. I think there's a lot of program like Bell, Let's Talk, or doing a similar program, and I think this is geared to initiate that first step of acknowledging that you need help. So you talk to somebody, talk to a friend, talk to a professional. We are in a first world country, and we have all the expertise around here ready for us. So there's no reason why we can't make use of it. So I think that's for me, that's what I can advise, and it's easier said than done. I understand, and being a Christian helps because you have almost that anchor. You have Christ to fall back on, but it doesn't mean that life can't be overwhelming. Sometimes your personal life and like I said, your personal life and your professional, sometimes they mix, and it becomes very overwhelming. And I'm pretty sure there are professionals that can help us out with that. So it's don't be afraid to reach out, I guess.
I'm actually gonna throw at you. Let's say you were talking to somebody on a plane. How would you describe what you do as a Christian paramedic? How would you describe your line of work? I actually have a line. Tell me whether you agree with me or not. So you would say, I represent the Lord in ministering to the sick. Do you agree with that, or how would you approach that? How would you describe what you do?
I heard the last guest you had here. He said he was saving lives.
Yeah.
So I would say the same thing. I save lives and I save soul with it. So if you want, but yeah, I think if somebody asks me on the plane, what do you do? And actually, I'm scared to say that I'm a paramedic because maybe there will be an emergency, and then now they look to you to do something right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a Christian, if it's a Christian, I guess the response is like, I serve the sick but people know what a paramedic is and what they do for a living. So yeah. I guess it's okay to say I'm a paramedic.
Right.
I save lives. I'm a Christian. I save the soul too.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know you have a poem.
Yes.
Would you like to read it?
Okay. I don't know if it's a poem. This poem really expressed what I felt throughout my life, and having kids with special needs I couldn't say it any better than this poem. But if you don't mind, I'm gonna read it.
Sure.
And it's entitled "Welcome to Holland" by Emily Perl Kingsley. So it says, I'm often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability. To try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After a month of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." "Holland? I?" You say. "What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy." But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy a new guidebook, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while and you'll catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, "Yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned." And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy what very special, very loving things about Holland. So I think I don't know if this is a poem, or I guess he called it a poem, a poem, but it says a lot about what I went through from childhood to trying to become a doctor, and then trying to raise a family, and then that I guess that direction veered off, and then you have this idea of what a good family is, what your family is going to be like, but then God gives you two special kids. Well, they're not Italy, but they're beautiful Holland, I guess. Your life changed, but then your perspective changed, and I think for whatever it is, it made me a better person. Better person as a paramedic, I guess. Better person as a church member. A better person as a co-worker. So I still go back to that idea of, why does God allow us to experience bad things? But I guess He's trying to make us a better person. I'm pretty sure He's got something for us to do at the end of the day, So that's what I can learn from my life experience, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And as we transition, could you tell us what books you're reading, what podcasts you're listening to, if any?
Podcast is I'm just starting into this podcast craze, so I haven't had a lot, but the thing I was listening to a lot would be and I admire this guy. He calls his podcast Philosophize This, and he's got lots of good thoughts and ideas that he says in there. So for a book, the book that really guided me through tough times and questions about life was a book written by David Benner. It's called Desiring God's Will. And he says towards the end of the book, he mentioned that God is not trying to tell us to decide whether to do this or to do that, or maybe turn left or turn right. Though that's the easiest I can paraphrase it to. But he's actually teaching us, and he wants us to learn on how we align our desires to his desires. So he said, whatever you do, if your desires are aligned with my desires, then you're on the right path. You're within his will. So I guess that's a more of the challenge, rather than praying for, what am I supposed to do? Do I make a decision to go left or to go right? He would rather train you to say, this is what God would desire. This is my decision. So it's a pretty good book, and it did me well so far.
Right.
So yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
So to end the podcast, would you mind closing us in prayer?
No, I don't at all. Yeah. So let's just pray.
Sure.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for how you have allowed us to interact and have this opportunity to talk about how you work through my life and my experiences, so that other people can learn and share your grace and goodness. Lord, thank you for the people who organize the podcast. Thank you for how you will allow these message to reach out and touch other people's lives, and maybe resonate, and then make them look into their own self and try to see what you have and what you are working in their lives. Lord, we pray for people who are involved in or had acquired the coronavirus. We are deeply in thoughts about how fast this virus is infecting human lives and affecting families and friends. But we acknowledge your sovereignty, Lord. We know that you have a plan for why these things happen in the world. Thank you, Lord, for giving us this chance to pray for our loved ones, so that we can express your joy and show them your love through us. Guide us home safe and keep us safe, Lord. All these we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. For the listeners also, Pepito is one of the leads for worship, right?
I play the guitar.
Yeah? Yeah. What songs are you listening to? I completely forgot to ask that question.
A lot of Zach Williams right now. There's a lot of Casting Crowns and Mercy Me.
Yeah.
I think Flawless would be a nice song that I really appreciate, and talks about how we see ourselves as damaged goods, or defective, but God sees us as flawless.
Right.
Maybe so. That one I really like that song. So yeah, Chris Tomlin.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pepito. And thank you for the listeners for listening. Thank you for your support. Thank you for all your comments. If you have any comments, you can go to any social media that we're on. You can post a comment, you can post a question, or you can even ask for a prayer request. And we continue to be grateful for your support. And if you are on Spotify or iTunes, you can subscribe and you'll get a weekly update for the new episode. And for the books, podcasts and music that Pepito was talking about, it will be in the show notes, and you can check it out over there. Thank you very much.
In closing tonight's podcast, I would like to thank Pepito and the EMS for their compassion and devotion to patient care in our community all year long. Thank you, Pepito. Please join us next week for another interesting evening of insightful conversation.